This lecture will cover human development from the womb up through childhood. We will cover development from adolescence onward in the next lecture. As we learned in the first week of this class, one of the major questions in psychology is to what degree certain characteristics are due to nature, that is, genetics, and how much is due to nurture, or learning and social environments. As we discussed, for the vast majority of human characteristics, the answer is both. The subfield of psychology that focuses on changes in cognitions, emotions, physiology, and social behaviors over the lifespan is known as developmental psychology. This week we will examine how our genetics and our environments combine to impact our cognitive, social, and physical development. We will also see how our cognitive, social, and physical developments change in tandem to each other. This week's lectures will cover our development through 5 major stages, starting with prenatal and ending with adulthood. Humans develop along these stages in relatively the same rate. There are some variations, but generally we follow this time frame. This lecture will discuss how we develop physically in the womb, then move on to discuss some of the reflexes we are born with. We will end with the physical, cognitive, and social development that occurs in infancy and childhood. Once sperm fertilizes an egg and creates a zygote, our physical development begins. This phase of prenatal development lasts for about 2 weeks, during which the zygote attaches to the uterine wall. The next stage is the embryo, during which time our organs begin to form. This is a very sensitive time of development, during which damage can occur that can have large impacts on our later health. After about 2 months, the embryo develops into a fetus. While there are no new organs emerging at this stage, it is a time of maturing in which those organs mature and the fetus grows fatter, larger, and stronger. After approximately 38 to 42 weeks of development in the womb, a baby is born. The health of the baby can be influenced by the hormones circulating in the womb, as well as other stresses put upon the mother. For example, if the mother has a hypothyroid condition, in which her thyroid gland does not produce enough hormones, the fetus could have a diminished intellectual development. Stress can have a similar effect, resulting in stress hormones, which can result in low birth weight and negative cognitive and behavioral outcomes. Teratogens, which are environmental agents that can damage the embryo or fetus, can also have a major impact on physical and cognitive development. For example, in the 1950s and 60s, a drug called thalidomide was prescribed to many mothers to decrease morning sickness. This drug caused various birth defects, depending on when in development the mothers took the drug. The most common birth defects were limb deformities. Once the true nature of the impact on developing embryos was determined, thalidomide was taken off the market. The most common toxic substance to impact development is alcohol. Fetal alcohol syndrome is estimated to impact 0.02 to 0.2% of births in the United States. The effect of mothers drinking can include interfering with brain development, causing permanent brain damage to the developing embryo or fetus. These impairments can impact memory, reasoning, learning, attention, and motor performance. How much alcohol is too much? This is a difficult question, with some heavy drinkers having normal babies, and some moderate drinkers having babies with fetal alcohol syndrome. For this reason, women who are pregnant or planning to become pregnant are advised to avoid alcohol altogether. We are born with a number of reflexes that aid in our survival. For example, when the cheek or mouth of a newborn is touched lightly, they turn towards the source of the sensation and attempt to suckle. This reflex is needed in order for the baby to be able to breastfeed. Another example is the grasping reflex, in which if the palms are lightly touched, a newborn tightens their grip around the object. It is believed that this is a holdover from our primate ancestors. If you observe newborn chimpanzees, they grasp onto their mothers and catch a ride. The short videos this week include some demonstrations of some of the reflexes we are born with. Newborns also cry when they're in discomfort and when hungry. Parents quickly attend to these cries. Interestingly, parents can pick out the cries of their own babies as opposed to the cries of other people's babies. The physical development of infants and children is startling. Unlike many other mammals who are born and quickly are able to start navigating their environments on their own, we are born quite helpless. The reason for this is our huge brains, which when you control for the overall mass of our bodies, are extremely large compared to all other animals. Thus we are born early in our development compared to other mammals, to allow us to pass through the birth canal before our heads grow too big. Thus in infancy and childhood, our brains continue to develop quite rapidly. We're born with the majority of the brain cells we will have in our lifetime. Most of our development after birth is making neural connections between these brain cells. This is what leads to cognitive skills such as language, reading, and mathematics, as well as physical abilities like leaping, walking, and swimming. How do we develop these new physical and cognitive abilities? Developmental psychologists consider new forms of development to be a dynamic system. That is, they view it as the child or infant actively exploring its environment and receiving feedback from that environment. For example, a child is lying on the floor and sees a colorful rattle nearby, but outside of her reach. The baby is not yet able to crawl, but rolling over brings the baby closer to the rattle. Another roll and the baby reaches out and gets the rattle, which makes a pleasant sound and is fun to shake. So the environment both encouraged the behavior and rewarded it. Another important aspect of development is maturation, which is that our development both cognitively and physically occurs in sequence. In order to walk, we first have to learn to stand. To learn to stand, we have to crawl. In order to crawl, we need to learn to sit up. Not only do we need the physical ability which develops in sequence, we also need the cognitive maturation as well. Newborns are normally born with a well-developed set of perceptual skills. While not all are fully developed at birth, we are quite good at smelling, hearing, tasting, and responding to touch. Within 2 hours, infants prefer sweet to all other tastes, and they're startled by loud sounds. However, our vision is quite poor at birth, with our range of visual acuity at about 8 to 12 inches. This helps to explain why babies put everything in their mouths. Since their vision is poor, but their sense of taste and touch are good, they explore their environment using these perceptual abilities. After birth, all of our perceptual skills develop quite rapidly. Just as our physical development occurs in a linear process, so too does the development of our mental processes. As mentioned earlier, we are born with the majority of our brain cells. However, through interacting with the environment, we create connections between these brain cells. During our early years, this is the most frequent occurrence, making new connections. However, as we age, we begin to prune away the connections we don't use, which results in the ones that remain being more efficient. The process of learning is a combination of these two processes, creating new connections and pruning away the unused ones. Both learning and the environment impact these processes, as does nutrition. This graphic shows the tragic consequences of neglect. The brain scan on the left is a healthy 3-year-old child. The one on the right is a scan of a 3-year-old child following severe neglect. This child had very limited exposure to language, touch, and social interaction. As you can see, this child's head is smaller than the healthy child, as well as the abnormalities in the brain's development. During our development, there are certain optimum periods in time in which to learn particular skills. These are called sensitive periods. One example is language, which is easiest to learn in the first 5 to 10 years of our lives. If you've ever tried to learn a second language after this time, you probably have had this experience. Children who are not exposed to any language during this period usually due to neglect, are never able to fully master language use. Tragic examples include Jeannie, who was severely neglected for the first 13 years of her life, and even with extensive professional support was unable to form coherent sentences. Emotional attachment, which we will discuss shortly, is also most easily acquired during infancy. A major contributor to our understanding of cognitive development in children was Jean Piaget. Piaget was a Swiss developmental psychologist who focused primarily on children. His theories have had enormous impact on developmental psychology. In 1926, Piaget introduced the term schema to psychology. Schemas are the way our brains organize information. Schemas help us to perceive, organize, process, and use information. They help us to make sense of the world around us. They help us to focus on relevant features in our environment. In ambiguous situations, they help us to fill in the missing information and to guide our interpretations. While schemas are generally adaptive, they can sometimes lead to bias. We will discuss some of these biases in more detail when we cover stereotypes and prejudice. Piaget proposed that we use our experiences to create new schemas by combining similar stimuli. This process is called assimilation. For example, a small child might see a large animal and ask what it is called. His mother might say, "It is a cow." This child might then create a schema that all large four-legged animals are cows. He might see a large horned animal and call it a cow. His mother would then correct him, saying, "No, that is a moose." He would then need to create a new schema for moose and adjust his schema for cow to exclude large animals with big horns. This process of adjusting schemas is accommodation. In addition to his work on schemas, Piaget proposed a stage theory of cognitive development and suggested that children pass through each of them on their way to their full cognitive abilities. There are 4 stages, and we will cover each in more detail. In order, they are sensorimotor, preoperational, concrete operational, and formal operational. The sensorimotor stage typically occurs from birth to about 2 years of age. As mentioned previously, infants explore the world and acquire information through their senses and the use of their motor skills. Automatic responses begin to become purposeful. During this period, children begin to understand that they are individuals and able to interact with the world. That is, they are agents of action. They also acquire what is known as object permanence. Prior to about 6 months, infants don't realize that objects they can't see still exist. This is why babies love the game peekaboo. They really think that you've disappeared. After about 2 years of age, Piaget suggests we enter the preoperational stage. We begin to think about objects that are not in our direct view and have conceptual beliefs about how the world operates. We think symbolically, and we can pretend. Children at this age also tend to make some systematic errors. For example, they don't understand the conservation of liquids. This is demonstrated by pouring a liquid into 2 equally sized and shaped glasses. The same amount is poured into both. Then the researcher will pour one of the glasses into a shorter but wider glass. Children who haven't mastered conservation of liquids will say that the taller glass has more liquid in it, even though we know they both still have the same amount. One of your videos this week is on conservation of liquids. Another limitation that children at the preoperational stage begin to master is egocentrism, which is the tendency to view the world through our own experiences. An example of this is a child who stands in front of the TV. When you ask them to move, they may look at you funny. They can see the TV fine, so their expectation is that everyone else can as well. They're not able to take the perspective of others, that their head is in the way. The ability to take another person's perspective, to understand and predict how they are feeling and what they are thinking, is called theory of mind. This is a vitally important skill as social human creatures. One test of whether children have developed theory of mind is demonstrated here. Children are shown this set of pictures, which introduces two characters, Sally and Anne. Sally puts her ball into the red cupboard and then leaves. While she is gone, Anne moves the ball to the blue cupboard. Children are then asked, which cupboard will Sally look in for her ball when she returns? What is your answer? If you've mastered theory of mind, you know that Sally will look in the red cupboard, because that is the last place she saw it. However, children who have not mastered theory of mind will say Sally will look in the blue cupboard, because they know that is where it's at. They are unable to discount the information they know, but Sally doesn't. Children who master theory of mind earlier tend to be more socially successful, since they are better able to recognize and predict how other people are feeling and what they're thinking. There are a couple of interesting videos on theory of mind this week. The third of Piaget's stages is concrete operational, and starts at around 7 years of age. At this stage, children are able to think about and understand operations, which leads to being able to use logic. They've also figured out conservation of liquids and other similar tasks. This is also a time within Western culture when they begin to learn transformative mathematics. So if they can easily add up one set of numbers, doing the reverse is easy for them. Their schemas are becoming more developed, and they're able to classify objects based on a single criterion, like size, shape, or color. The final stage is formal operational, which begins at about 12 years of age. In this stage, children are able to form hypotheses about the world and then test them through deductive logic. We use systematic processes to find answers to our problems. Piaget was extremely influential in our understanding of cognitive development, and he made many correct observations. However, modern cognitive researchers have raised a number of challenges to his theories. First, they argue that our development is a continuous process, rather than through stages. Children could demonstrate some abilities that put them in one stage, and others that place them in another stage. The second challenge is that children actually demonstrate their abilities at younger ages than Piaget proposed. For example, even babies demonstrate an understanding of how the world works. If you throw a ball into the air, what is our expectation about what should happen next? Well, it should fall back down. Babies also have this expectation. If you throw a ball into the air and it stops, babies react in a way that shows they understand something odd is occurring. They stare wide-eyed at the ball. Thus, they know the ball should fall to the ground, and when it doesn't, they are surprised. The last challenge is that formal logic is not as fundamental to cognition as Piaget suggests. In fact, the formal operational stage is not found universally in all adults. In fact, some maintain concrete operational thinking skills through their entire lifespan. As we develop physically and cognitively, we begin to explore our environments more and more. The most important feature of our environments are other people. Thus, we also begin to develop our social skills. Socio-emotional development includes the maturation of skills and abilities that enable people to live successfully in the world with other people. For example, theory of mind. Bonding is another adaptive trait. Forming bonds with other people provides protection for individuals, increases their chance of survival, and thus increases their chance of passing along their genes to future generations. The foundation of social development is attachment. Attachment is the formation of a strong emotional bond with caregivers that stays strong and consistent over time and situations. This process is adaptive in that it increases our survival, since, as you recall, as babies we are helpless and rely on our parents or other caregivers to nurture and protect us. Attachment begins quite early in our development, with variations across people and cultures. There are some interesting cross-cultural findings about how adults and babies interact. Adults generally tend to respond to infants in a way that infants can understand, as in making exaggerated facial expressions and speaking in higher-pitched tones. Babies actually attend to higher-pitched voices, In virtually every culture studied, men, women, and even children intuitively raise the pitch of their voice when talking to babies, and babies respond by maintaining eye contact. What drives attachment? That is, what is it about caregivers that babies respond to? Is it the nourishment that they provide, or is it the comfort that they give? Harry Harlow conducted a series of studies in the 1950s to answer this question. Baby rhesus monkeys were placed in cages with two surrogate mothers, inanimate objects with monkey-like faces. The photo shown here shows two mothers. The one on the left was made of bare wire and provided the baby with nourishment. The mother on the right was made of soft terry cloth and did not provide milk. Which do you think the babies preferred? Overwhelmingly, the babies sought out the cloth mother. When scared, they ran to it. When they wanted to sleep, they cuddled with it. The babies only sought the wire mother when hungry. Harlow suggested that our attachment to our caregivers is driven by the physical and psychological comforts that they give us. There is a video this week on one of Harlow's classic studies. Developmental psychologists, as well as parents, have noted that about 8 to 12 months, right around when children begin to move about on their own by crawling and then walking, they develop separation anxiety, getting upset when they cannot see their caregivers. Mary Ainsworth developed a test of this process to evaluate the different styles of attachment. This test is called the strange situation test. Through evaluating many children, Ainsworth identified a healthy style of attachment, called secure attachment, and a cluster of less adaptive styles, called insecure attachment. The majority of children are securely attached, confident to explore their environments when their caregiver is around, and able to be comforted when they're distressed. Insecurely attached children demonstrate different patterns, as we will see in the next slide. Here's the strange situation test. The caregiver brings the child into a new room, and once the child is settled, leaves. The pattern of responses of the child when the caregiver leaves and then returns is used to determine the child's attachment style. Securely attached children are upset when the caregiver leaves, but are consolable when they return, quickly calming down. Avoidant attached children don't get upset by the absence of their caregivers, often even ignoring them when they return. Anxious ambivalent children are greatly upset when the caregiver leaves, but are not able to be comforted when they return. So what leads to one style over the other? Attachment is a complex process in which both the child and the caregiver influence the outcome. Insecure attachment could be due to neglect on the caregiver's part, with the child learning that the caregiver is not available for comfort. It could also be due to the child. For example, children with autism might not cling to the parent or make eye contact, which makes it more difficult for the caregiver to form a secure attachment. Attachment is important because it predicts later success in our relationships and other domains such as school. It also protects other outcomes such as depression. Therefore, early prevention of insecure attachment should take place, helping the caregiver to develop the skills to increase the chances of secure attachment. In addition to the impact of social behaviors on secure attachment, there is a growing field of research on the impact of hormones on this process. Oxytocin is often called the cuddle hormone and plays a role in attachment. In the mother, it promotes behaviors that increase bonding. For example, it releases during breastfeeding and passes through the milk to the child. A lot of interesting and transformative processes occur during our first 12 or so years of life. Our cognitive, physical, and social development prepares us to interact with our world. During this time, we go from helpless newborns with a couple of reflexive skills to fully ambulatory agents able to make changes in our environment. We go from being surprised by peekaboo to understanding logic and symbology. At about 12, we enter another time of immense change, adolescence, the stage between childhood and adulthood. We will cover this period and what comes after in the next lecture.